Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, there's been a lot of conversation both in and out of this hearing room today. Conversations about a co-president referencing Elon Musk, referencing the work that Doge is doing. I think it's important to remember that President Trump ran on this. I mean, he said we're going to look for wasteful spending across our government. We're $36 trillion in debt, y'all. That's not only fiscally irresponsible, it is actually morally irresponsible. And the difference in this administration and the last administration is that President Trump is actually the final arbiter. And it's interesting that none of you had anything to say over the last 4 years when it is clear that our commander-in-chief was not in command. And if we're going to use the term co-president, then let's go back and say co-president Jake Sullivan, co-president Ron Klain, co-president Jill Biden. I mean, it seems that some of the biggest decisions were made during the president's afternoon nap time. And so I just think we need to be a little bit more honest about what's been laid out and what's actually occurring. Chair Powell, I want to discuss some monetary policy issues, but I first want to highlight a few supervisory items. We unfortunately started 2023 with several bank failures in which the Fed itself admits its supervisors were, quote, too slow to ask. The question has been asked earlier about who was fired, who was not. I think that there's some real merit to having accountability that we have not seen there. In the aftermath of those failures, the Fed was certainly not slow to act when it came to new regulations, like the new capital requirements that would have put the U.S. banks at a global disadvantage and actually hurt consumers in my state. The way I look at this is the world came up with a gold standard, and then Vice Chair Barr said, hold my beer. And unfortunately, that hurts Alabamians. In addition to that, we had Community Reinvestment Act and stress testing frameworks that were basically adopted in secret. Or as we discussed last week, the reputational risk and just the arbitrary nature of that and those standards that were used to push political agendas. None of this is acceptable, and we've got to take a look at how to promote greater accountability and transparency into the Fed's supervisory function. Shifting gears, as of January 30th, the Federal Reserve had a mark-to-market loss on its balance sheet of roughly $221 billion. In fact, I looked back and the Fed has posted losses since September of 2022. Meanwhile, we've seen transfers to the CFPB totaling $2 billion since September of 2022. So just to clarify, Chair Powell, these money transfers are requested by the CFPB director each quarter and then directly deposited by the Fed. Is that how that works?
So the director of the CFPB requests money, and we, under the law, we send that money, yes.
So, in fact, but Dodd-Frank actually prohibits the Fed from actually reviewing or amending those requests.
That is correct.
And so it gives full discretion to the CFPB director.
Up to, I think, 12% of our, there's a ceiling on that, but that's correct.
So just to level set, how many times, has the CFPB funding request been denied by the Fed?
We don't have the authority to deny it under the law.
Zero, right?
Zero, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And by the way, I'd like to applaud the current administration and acting director vote for inserting some accountability back into the agency by pausing these quarterly just blank checks. On that, I know there's been a lot of conversation around the Bureau over the last few days, but I do want to focus on those last couple of years, particularly the $2 billion the CFPB received from September 2022 up to the last receipt on January 2nd, 2025. Congress specified in statute that the Fed shall fund the CFPB through the combined earnings of the Federal Reserve System. However, as I mentioned, the Fed has no current earnings. It has a balance sheet of negative $200 billion. So instead of the recent audit statement saying the Fed is funding the CFPB through assessments on its reserve banks, Mr. Chair, there are only two statutes that authorize the Fed to make reserve bank assessments, and neither permit the CFPB to fund transfers. So what authority exactly did the Federal Reserve have to assess the reserve banks in this manner over the last 2 years? I just wanted kind of a fact-finding.
We looked at that question very carefully, and it's very clear on the law and the legislative history that we're still required to make those payments to do so.
Appreciate it. Thank you.